Welcome back to Abbotsbury. This is a lovely spring morning walk through the garden. We're going to focus a little bit on what we call the secret walk through here and see what's in flower. Today it's beautiful blue sky, birds are singing, lots to see, and trying to be selective of what plants are in flower. It's just so much choice at the moment, but we'll follow this path down here and see what I can discover. Actually, looking up here straight away, we have this great big towering blocks of rhododendron. Because rhododendron arboreum, which is a hybrid of it. It's a native of the Himalayas. It's one of the biggest tree rhododendrons in the world. In parts of the world they can get to 100 feet tall. And in this garden here there are some absolutely huge rhododendrons. There's one actually way up there you can just about see, poking up in the tops of the blue sky. So that's got to be at least 70 feet tall. So. Behind us here is a rhododendron. Beautiful flowers coming out here, you can see. If you look up into the tops of the flower, you can see the red calyx inside the stamens. And this is Rhododendron grande. It's one of the big giant natives of the Himalayas. This is not a typical example because these leaves are quite small. But as you look further up, you'll see them getting bigger, and they really are quite big, magnificent leaves. One of the things with rhododendron specialists is identification. I'm no expert, but certainly you can see there's like a metallic sheen on the bottom of this particular Sana grande, which kind of gives you a good indication of the species. And a lot of rhododendrons have a much coarser leaf. Well, this is Rhododendron falconeri, not quite in flower yet, as you can see. That's to come a bit later in May. But if you look underneath, this beautiful russet coloured, what they call ingementum, and it's actually very, very fine hairs that cover the leaf. You can actually rub it off. And some rhododendrons even have it on the top of the leaf. But it's typical of a lot of these plants, and the botanists say that it gives the plant a degree of protection. It helps the plant maintain humidity on the leaves in the summer, and you get a summer drought. And in the reverse, it helps to keep the leaves protected and slightly warmer in a very cold winter. So it has certain uses, this ingementum underneath the leaf. And possibly helps stop insects feeding on it. That's another theory, but one of the problems of managing the woodland garden, of course, you get lots of big storms in the winter, and this is a magnificent, or it was a beautiful English oak, Quercus robur, that collapsed in a storm several years ago now, flattening everything in its path. But we left it in here, basically you can't get at it, but it's quite an interesting feature. Surprisingly, is a Magnolia Star Wars, which right underneath it got flattened, and it's over the years it's worked its way back out, and now it's in full flower again, but it's got a Z-shaped bend going out through the bottom of it to escape the trunk. And behind us flowering here, you've got one of the yellow magnolias, Magnolia Elizabeth. Most people associate magnolias as being white. This is quite a creamy yellow, and there are now several cultivars of yellow forms of magnolias available in the nursery trade. And there's the Rhododendron arboreum in the background again. As I'm stood here, what about this for a specimen? Xanthoxylon. This is a really spiny trunk on this plant, quite bizarre, almost sort of prehistoric. But it's what they call the Sichuan pepper tree, and they produce very fine black seeds which they grind down into another form of pepper, or substitute to pepper possibly. But quite interesting architectural trunk on it with those spines all the way up through it. Oh, here's a plant I quite like, called Jovelana. It's only a herbaceous sort of shrub, but Jovelana punctata. It's got beautiful little tiny intricate flowers with little yellow landing pads, really attractive for insects and pollinators. It's a native from southern Chile. I was lucky enough to travel around Chile in 2005 and we saw this growing wild on the edge of the road and all sorts of places. But it's a real nice attractive plant this time of year, and I say it's very beneficial for wildlife. I need to show you this climbing hydrangea down here. It's nothing spectacular to look at the moment, but it brings back memories for myself having planted it when I first came here many years ago. So if you look at this, if you ever travel in the tropics or India, this almost looks like a ficus, a strangling fig tree. Giant trunks coming up through here. Look at this. And there's actually a Hydrangea ceratifolia, another native from the temperate rainforests of Chile. I planted this, and I know when I planted it, I got a label here, 1992, not long after I'd started here, so I've been here a long time now. But however, that is Hydrangea ceratifolia all the way up this oak tree. It must be 100 feet, and that is probably a record breaker, because it's you know, all the reference books I've read about it, they've said it's been seen in the wild up to 50 feet. In this country, not many big ones, but looking here, I can see the flower buds just about forming. Where are they? There's some up there. Small white fluffy flowers, not perhaps as attractive as some of the other hydrangeas, but it's very interesting all the way, right to the top of that tree. And I say, the trunk is that's just amazing. Can't help it. You can't help immerse yourself in this plant, because this is a rhododendron, okay? But man, the smell is just so sweet, it's beautiful. And Latin names do help with some plants. Some people haven't got a clue what they mean, but this is called Rhododendron fragrantissimum, hence the beautiful scent. As we were saying, this is the secret walk, but a lot of plants in here have been obtained from various plant hunting expeditions, some from botanists or gardeners going out from Kew Gardens. People like Roy Lancaster in the past donated plants to us, fantastic, interesting species. And on our labelling system, we have, let's take this example. This is a tree called Chimaeunensis. And we have on the bottom S. Beck, and the anything with S. Beck on it was the Sino-British expedition to China back in the late 1980s, I believe. And so the seed was collected, grown at Kew and Edinburgh, and then distributed to other big plant collections such as ourselves. So some of these are true species collected in the wild by botanists within the last 30-40 years. So they're quite unusual, not generally available in the nursery trade. Here's a nice plant too. This is very popular, for sale everywhere now. If you've got a woodland garden, you've got shady conditions, fairly moisture retentive soil. This is Podophyllum, aptly named Spotty Dotty. It's a beautiful plant. It's been a hybridised plant from its parents are from Asia, but it's been crossbred to produce this fantastic effect. There are other species growing well up in North America, but I love the flowers underneath it as well, which you can't see, but you have to hunt for them. Just starting to form underneath the flower. They're beautiful maroon red flowers. But the leaf is spectacular. And what I like about it, it's slug and snail resistant. So it beats hostas from my point of view. You see through the sunlight, there's fantastic white blossom on this tree here. This is a plant like that hydrangea, one of the first trees I planted when I first came to Abbotsbury as a little seedling. And then it was called Michelia dulcofer. Now botanists have changed, it's now Magnolia dulcofer, but you can see it looks like a magnolia. And that's a beautiful, one of the best times I've ever seen it flowering actually, is it's flowering all over right the way through. I can give you the scale of it by coming down here. It's quite big, my baby. Really impressive flowering. In parts of, it comes from the Himalayas and right the way through China, Yunnan, right up to Bhutan. I think in Bhutan it's a very fine timber. They make lots of their houses out of this. It's also, as you can see, a beautiful ornamental tree. This is one of the problems of the woodland garden. Every now and again you've got a favourite plant that performs really well every year. Then you walk past it the next spring and it does this. See, the leaves are collapsing. There's plenty of moisture in the soil. It looks like it's got drought, but that's probably the effect of honey fungus. And I'm pretty certain if you dug down you'd probably find the honey fungus in the root system. It's pretty much everywhere in a woodland garden. It's endemic in these sort of places. It seems to thrive on the root systems of trees which are slightly weak or old, decaying. But you have to live with it. It's part of nature and it's part of the decay process, unfortunately. But we'll have to probably dig that one out in the next few weeks. Quite a few years ago now, this part of the Dorset coast was given the title of the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Status Site. The gardens have been here since 1765, right on the edge of the coast. You can hear the sea in the winter, the gales blowing, the beach, but you could never see it. So I wanted to try to get the garden to a point where we can go and see the sea, because we know it was just over this hill up here. So the project was to clear out part of the woodland and open up a magnificent walkway up through here, which we flank with magnolias each side, so it's a Magnolia Walk. And you get to the top of this hill and you've got one of the best viewpoints of the whole of the Jurassic Coast. So let's go and have a look at it. It better be there. So to cross here, you can see we've got the whole expanse of the Chile Beach running through here, and right at the far end is Portland Bill out there, and this is the Fleet, which is a tidal reserve water that comes up from White Regis, Weymouth Harbour, saltwater lagoon basically, shallow water, and it also houses our famous swannery, which is just based down on the tip over there. You can actually just about see the swans. But a lot of history here. We did a bit of research to tell the story of the area, and actually across the beach there you can see these concrete blocks. They're called the tank teeth. They were built during the Second World War to stop any invasion coming up from this part of the beach. Yeah, the reed bed down here was featured in one of the Harry Potter movies with Hagrid, I think, or people charging through the reed beds. And there's St Catherine's Chapel up on the hill, you can see in the distance. I mean, that is one of these survivors from the dissolution of the monastery. Think of the name Abbotsbury. It was the abbots of Abbotsbury. It was a big monastery until Henry VIII had the monasteries pulled down. But there are a few survivors, and that's the 13th century chapel, St Catherine's, up there on top of the hill. It's been a waymark for sailors for many centuries. They can tell where they are from the coast. They used to be able to. And also it was used as a beacon for lighting the fires up on that hill there to let everybody know all the way down through the coast that the Spanish were invading. And here are some of the cannons. Also, lots of history about these. Some were sited as land cannons on the old Abbotsbury Gardens, Abbotsbury Castle site down there. Some were washed up or found in the shingle after a huge storm off this beach here, and there's stories that they may have come from the Spanish Armada, but we don't have a true accuracy on some of these cannons. To sort of finish off here, I'm just thinking, we did mention earlier St Catherine's Chapel back up there. Some years ago I was reading an article about Abbotsbury Gardens in 1895 in the Country Life magazine, and it described what fantastic views there were to St Catherine's Chapel. I thought, well, where are they? You can't see them anywhere, can't see it, so because the trees have all grown up a century later. So with careful tree surgery we worked out where St Catherine's Chapel is in the landscape, and we created a window frame, a hole through the tree canopy to get a glimpse of St Catherine's. And what it's not a new thing, it's what Capability Brown used to do in his great big landscapes. It's called using a borrowed feature to feature outside the garden to make of interest, a focal point to look through. So if you can look through here, there's St Catherine's silhouetted beautifully through the tree canopy. Just going to finish off now. Earlier I was talking about a couple of the early plants that I put in when I first came to Abbotsbury, and here's another one. We planted a pair of Trachycarpus fortunei in front of the summer house that we created. Amazingly, that one there is twice the size of the other one. It's obviously got its feet in some decent soil there, but that's 30 years to get to that size for this big palm tree. And covering it, we planted this is Clematis nepalensis from Nepal. It's an interesting climber. It flowers usually around about December time in the winter. And then when it's finished flowering, the seed heads form these remarkable fluffy heads like that. I think that's just as attractive actually as the flower. It's almost like our native old man's beard. And I think this is an attractive flower and seed head, and also the strange thing about this tree, this climbing plant, is that it's it goes into summer drought, and it just loses all its leaves. It's summer dormancy they call it, and it just doesn't appear to be there. It looks almost dead in the summer, and then it comes alive again in the winter. Anyway, this is our summer house, and it creates the atmosphere of a Chinese woodland area, which is what we call the Himalayan glade here. Lots of interesting different species coming and going all the time in flower. Great autumn colour here too, come to think of it. Anyway, we've given you a flavour of what Abbotsbury is like in the spring here, and there's lots more to come. Certainly May's a really good month for a continuation of rhododendrons and magnolias, and then all our summer flowering borders are starting to grow now, and the more exotic tender species will be there to see later on in the summer. So do come and see us. Enjoy a lovely day in this beautiful sunny garden like this. Can't guarantee the sun though.